January 27th, 2017. I have Stanley Miller here pulled up on Wikipedia. I'll read this whole thing out because I think it's really well written. Stanley Lloyd Miller, March 7th, 1930 to March 20th, 2007, was an American chemist who made landmark experiments in the origin of life by demonstrating that a wide range of vital organic molecules can be synthesized by fairly simple chemical processes from inorganic substances. In 1952, he carried out the Miller-Urey experiment, which shows that complex organic molecules can be synthesized from inorganic precursors. The experiment was widely reported and provided support for the idea that the chemical evolution of the early Earth had led to the natural synthesis of chemical building blocks of life from inanimate, inorganic molecules. He has been described as the father of prebiotic chemistry. In 1952, he was 22 years old, just so you guys know. He was straight out of his work in college, his 4-year Bachelor's of Science degree. But I'll go ahead and read this whole thing out because it's really well written. Stanley Miller was born in Oakland, California. He was the second child after a brother Donald of Nathan and Edith Miller, descendants of Jewish immigrants from Belarus and Latvia. His father was an attorney and held the office of the Oakland Deputy District Attorney in 1927. His mother was a school teacher, so that education was quite a natural environment in the family. In fact, while in Oakland High School, he was nicknamed a chem whiz. This was back when he was in high school. He followed his brother to the University of California at Berkeley to study chemistry, mainly because he felt that Donald would be able to help him on the subject. So he went there for help. He was like, hey, I'm just going to follow what you're doing and you can help me out along the way. He completed his Bachelor's of Science in June of 1951. For graduation course, he faced financial problems as his father died in 1946, leaving the family with a money shortage. Fortunately, with the help from Berkeley faculty, UC Berkeley did not then have assistantships. He was offered teaching an assistantship at the University of Chicago in February 1951, which could provide the basic funds for graduate work. He joined this post and got registered for a PhD program in September. So he went straight to his PhD program. No work-related stuff at all, just straight to your program. He frantically searched for a thesis topic to work on, meeting one professor after another, and he was inclined towards theoretical problems, as experiments tended to be laborious. He was initially convinced to work with the theoretical physicist Edward Teller on synthesis of elements. Following the customs of the university, where a graduate student is obliged to attend seminars, he attended a chemistry seminar in which the Nobel laureate Harold Urey gave a lecture on the origin of the solar system and how organic synthesis could be possible under a reducing environment such as the primitive Earth's atmosphere. Now this is when it starts getting interesting. Miller was immensely inspired. After a year of fruitless work with Teller, and the prospect of Teller leaving Chicago to work on the hydrogen bomb, Miller was prompted to approach Urey in September 1952 for a fresh research project. Urey was not immediately enthusiastic on Miller's interest in prebiotic synthesis, as no successful works had been done, and he even suggested working on thallium and meteorites. With persistence, Miller persuaded Urey to pursue electric discharges in gases. He found clear evidence for the production of amino acids in the reaction vessel. He was always afraid that some specks of fly excrement might be the source of the amino acids he discovered in the reaction tube, or so was chided by his classmates. This was not the case, and the result was a clear demonstration that a host of organic chemical compounds could be produced by purely inorganic processes. Miller eventually earned his doctorate degree in 1954. That's when he was 24 years old, and a long-lasting reputation. From spectroscopic observations on stars, it is now well known that complex organic molecules are formed in the gases blown off carbon-rich stars as a result of chemical reactions. The fundamental issue of what the connection was between the prebiotic organic compounds and the origin of life has remained. It is no longer a question of how does this all begin. The fact that this guy, this Stanley Miller gentleman, passed away May 20th, 2007. I was still in the Marine Corps. I had about 2 more months left before I went on terminal leave, before I exited the Marine Corps and went to Florida State University. It's a fucking tragedy knowing that this kind of understanding came 4 years too late before I could share it with somebody. It fucking sucks, man, because every time I'm like, wow, this is really great, this is a good idea, blah 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 blah, boom, I learned the fucker died. They're gone, and we're stuck with a bunch of unoriginal assholes that work in academia that have their heads up their asses and don't have any creative insight at all. They just repeat what they're told. It sucks. A lot of the really creative, really talented minds have fucking kicked the bucket. It's just frustrating to read that. And the reason why I came to this was that I'm reading a book called Moon Rocks, and it explains very easily what's going on. And it was talking about Urey, and I'm like, oh, I know the Miller-Urey experiment, where they take a bunch of inorganic molecules, they zap them with electric discharge, and they collect all these amino acids that they form out of it. But I was reading about Miller-Urey, and I was like, well, didn't he have a younger student that was doing some experiment? And then I looked this up, and I was like, damn, there's so much more to it. This experiment was done in 1952. That was 48 plus 17, what's that, 65 years ago? Right, 65? And academics still haven't figured out that the reducing atmosphere required for this experiment to take place was on the Earth itself when it was a gas giant, when it was a Jupiter-like object, and it started cooling and collapsing, combining the elements into molecules. How easy is that to understand? Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn have highly reducing atmospheres. Exactly what's required in this guy's experiment. Now, mind you, the experiment was first carried out because of the hypothesis of Alexander Oparin, which was the Soviet guy who basically stated in a few words that the planet formation is stellar evolution itself, if you read the Origins of Life. So now we're coming full circle. Alexander Oparin in 1915, 1920s, and all his colleagues, they all thought together and came up with the idea that stars cool and collapse and become what are called planets. Everybody forgot about it. Nobody gave a shit. And then a little part of the writings that they ignored were left out, the planet stuff, and then they only focused on the reducing atmosphere and the chemistry part of it. And then they took that hypothesis and then they did experiments on it back in 1952, which is 30 years after the fact. They showed that this is how amino acids can form from inorganic molecules. And now here we are in 2017 discovering exoplanets that are in different sizes and in stages of evolution. And I step into the ball game and I'm like, yo, we need to go back to Alexander Oparin's original hypothesis that stellar evolution is planet formation, because that's how the shit works. So literally, it took 100 years for this to go full circle. And to think, academia says science is self-correcting, it makes you wonder if it really is self-correcting, or if it's just them like running around aimlessly without any direction or any understanding of how scientific progress is made. It makes you wonder if they're really as organized and as well-intentioned and as with their shit together as they want you to believe. The truth is they don't have their shit together. They're running around willy-nilly doing whatever, and they don't have any direction, and they don't have any purpose. This is why it took 100 years for them to go back and to figure out that we've always known about how planets are formed. They're older stars. But anyways, I think I make this talk long enough. All right, later, y'all.